Welcome back to Worst Seats in House. Mike Russo, Anthony LaPanta. First show of July, a week before we go to Spain. Anthony, excited? You already you got the early suntan going, the burn.
I'm really excited. It's not a burn. It's just a tan. It's a golf tan.
Yeah.
I have to get my left hand tan line removed because that's the golf glove hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I'll wear flip-flops in Spain because I have golf sock tan lines that are ridiculous. We're enjoying a nice Italian red tonight while we do the show.
I thought this was Spanish red.
Or Spanish red, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
just to get us ready. Tempranillo grape. Got to get ready, just as we did before we went to Portugal. Yes, I'm really excited. I've not been. We've talked about this before. I know you've been there before, but I have not. I've heard nothing but great things. I can't wait for the trip. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it'll be really cool doing that. And then
you have to fly to Atlanta to pick up your mom on the way?
Yeah, so I'm going early, day early, and we're on the same flight. So we get in the day before you. I think you guys almost have the same itinerary, only we're going a day before. So I'll spend some quality time with her. And then
So you'll be really happy to see the rest of the crew arrive.
So yes. So that'll be fun. And then we'll be back. And then I got a crazy month of August. I'm going to Hawaii. I'm going to Milan for 4 days for the NHL Media Tour car wash European version. Then I come back from Milan the day later. I'm going to Detroit to Plymouth, Michigan for the USA Men's Olympic Orientation Camp, and then I got Vegas for the NHL Media Tour. So I got a lot of travel.
I think I'm going to go to Big Sandy in McGregor, Minnesota, to hang out with some college buddies.
Nice, that'll be fun.
While you travel the world.
And we'll see. The schedule comes out July 16th. We'll see what that looks like for the Wild. I expect them to be on the road a lot during World Juniors. The Ottawa Senators last year were on the road for 9 straight games. In fact, they came through Minnesota. And remember, they didn't want to fly home after Minnesota, even though they had 3 or 4 days before Dallas. So they went down to Dallas and just hung out there for felt like a week.
And I think it'll be interesting to see because you have the break. Mm-hmm. But the World Juniors is more than just the tournament that starts after. There's warm-up games.
Yeah.
There's exhibition games. So maybe the Wild will be able to sneak a home game or two in.
No, they definitely aren't.
I'm saying before Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, after Christmas, it's done. They're going to be on the road for a long time. But it'll make for a difficult, challenging part of the schedule.
You have the Olympics that are I'm gone 3 weeks exactly. I leave February 2nd because I get there.
There's not a big stretch between those two tournaments.
Yeah, exactly. Only a month, less than a month. But I leave the 2nd because the women's tournament starts actually before the opening ceremonies. So I'm going there actually a week before Pierre LeBrun and Chris Johnson because I'm helping cover the women's tournament. In fact, I'm going to miss some Wild games this season because the rivalry series that U.S. plays Canada and women's. They have a couple games in Cleveland and Buffalo in November, and so I'll be going to those games. So it's going to be an interesting season. We'll see how it goes.
You miss games every year.
That's true.
You don't work every game like some of us do.
Yeah, you work really hard. So anyway, let's talk about, last week we were at Split Rocks. We talked about how the trade market really wasn't materializing. This free agent class wasn't extremely plentiful. And all of a sudden, day before free agency, the Wild, for nothing, get Vladimir Tarasenko. Now, this isn't the Vladimir Tarasenko from his heyday when he was, getting 40, 35 goals every year for St. Louis. He did in 21-22 have 34 goals and 82 points, I believe. But it's been, production-wise, his last 3 years, not very good. He was traded to Florida during their Stanley Cup run a couple years ago at the deadline from Ottawa. Played pretty well there, had almost a point a game in the regular season, and then the playoffs had 5 goals in 19 games, and played on a line with Lundell and Luosterainen, won the Cup, but then he goes to Detroit on a 2-year deal, not a good fit, and he basically asked to be traded, and the Wild came to his rescue and got him for future considerations, which again in the National Hockey League literally means nothing. And what was really interesting about our conversation with Vladimir Tarasenko on Zoom the other day is that Kirill Kaprizov did a lot of the recruiting. He talked to him a couple times on June 30th, and then the Wild, he agreed to waive his no trade clause. He had a full no trade to come to Minnesota.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This isn't the Tarasenko in his prime, but it is a guy that, yes, last year was an offseason in Detroit. The 2 years prior to that, he was over 50 points both years. I don't watch a lot of Red Wings games, admittedly, so I wasn't watching them all season, but the few games I did, he didn't feel like he was in the right spot. Didn't feel like he was in a spot where he could produce. Maybe all of a sudden you get a little bit of a rejuvenation. I don't think there's this. We're not looking at a guy who's about to score 80 points, but it wouldn't shock me if he got back to 50 and got to 50 in a way where it was 20 goals. And if he's, you never know. We've seen other guys who all of a sudden, when they're paired with younger, exciting, more skillful players, all of a sudden they look a couple of years younger. We've also seen guys like Gus Nyquist when he came back to the Wild this year that make you roll your eyes, or not roll your eyes, scratch your head and say how fast this guy just aged. And, Tarasenko is coming off a 33-point season. It wouldn't be a major shock if all of a sudden you saw him land in that area again. So we'll see what happens, but it's essentially a no-risk addition for Minnesota, and he probably gives them more punch in their top six than they had last year.
Yeah, because your guy Marcus Johansson is no longer on there. He can't give him that little production. You should have seen.
Not
Anthony's
really my guy. The guy did exactly what you thought you'd get for $2 million.
Yeah,
and I think they have higher expectations for what Vladimir Tarasenko will bring.
Right. If you remember the home game against the Detroit Red Wings, which remember the Wild played a home and home coming out of the Four Nations against Detroit. The home game, the Wild had the big come from behind game in Detroit. That's how the Canadians say it. And then the home game,
where Joel Eriksson looked as good as he's looked all season.
Right. But then the home game the Wild played,
we found out he was injured and didn't even play.
Exactly. Marco Rossi scored the first goal of that game. Lauko scored the second, and then the Wild proceeded to blow a 2-goal lead that was triggered by Vladimir Tarasenko.
It was, but remember, that was that weird sequence where Eriksson had come back from the Four Nations, probably had one of his best games of the year in Detroit when the Wild came from behind to win.
Yep.
And then it was after morning skate, when they were playing at home, where all of a sudden we find out Eriksson's not going to play tonight.
Yeah, it was.
He had practiced the day before.
Yeah, that's when
and then
so I found out that morning, and I remember texting some people with the team, and was able to confirm that he was injured, and we didn't see him again for a while. Then after the season, we find out that one reason why he came on that New York trip with Kaprizov is that he was seeing the same doctor because he was also dealing with the abdominal stuff. So kind of also explains why he couldn't produce in the playoffs. I don't think he had a goal in the playoffs. So Vladdy, what I really find really cool is that John Hines is going to go down to Florida, meet up with him, try to impress upon him about how just important he is to the team, try to develop that relationship. He is coming to camp. They are penciling him at second line right wing. I think it is important for him to play on the off wing. We've seen him on the left side where he's not nearly as productive. I think, a lot of left shot wingers love to play on that offside because it's a way to come into the zone and really just unleash shots. And if you put a Zuccarello on that left wing or even a Boldy, it's going to be interesting. Like he's going to play right now. If Marco Rossi's on this team, he's going to play with either Rossi or Eriksson as a center, most likely, or Boldy and Zuccarello on the left wing with him. I mean, that is better than what he was playing with in Detroit.
No, and that's why I'm saying sometimes maybe we saw it with Matt Zuccarello. Look at how his career was rejuvenated when all of a sudden he's playing with Kirill Kaprizov. Now, I don't think that anybody's expecting to see that same kind of production from Tarasenko, but it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to see a guy all of a sudden look a half a step quicker when the guys on the ice with him are moving the puck a little quicker.
Right.
And in Detroit, he was on the third line most of the year. And that's not where guys like this are going to produce.
Yeah, exactly. And he played on the third line in Florida, and he just didn't seem like a great fit in Ottawa.
I will say I was wrong about him that year that Florida acquired him. You mentioned it earlier, and when they got him, I just thought, boy, this doesn't make any sense. He doesn't fit the way they play. He doesn't fit the speed with which they play. And then all of a sudden in the playoffs, he was a productive player, and it was in a third line role. He had the 5 goals, 9 points during, I think it was 22 or 24 games, their run of the cup that year. And I just remember watching him thinking, boy, I never would have guessed that he was going to produce and contribute anything in that role. And then he did. It was So I was wrong about him then. Maybe he'll be that kind of a player with Minnesota.
He had a couple goals in the Stanley Cup final, and a couple goals in the early rounds. I will say he definitely wasn't the Vlad that we had grown to see. But look, on the Zoom the other day, and we're on a Zoom. He looked great. He seemed excited. He waived his no trade. It's a contract year. Kaprizov and him are buddies. He's gonna play. He knows he has a chance to play with very skilled players. Like you put Zuccarello on the left wing and have put pucks on the platter for him.
He's not 38.
Yeah,
he's like 34 years old.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a big difference. I think you're not talking about a guy that is quite literally at the tail end of his career. This is a guy who might still be in the league for another 4 or 5 years. So,
right.
So this year is a big year for him, and therefore could be a big year for the Wild.
Really good guy too. I've known him for a long time, just from scrums and things like that. And he's engaging. I think we'll all like him from a media perspective. The interesting thing here is, so why did the Wild do it? It's a 1-year flyer. It's 4.75. It's a bet. And the bet is that he's going to play much, much better here than he did in Detroit. Now, what do I think happened? I think that in doing due diligence on Brock Boeser in the days leading up to free agency, he was the only guy the Wild were going to consider, other than a fourth line, third line, bottom six center on the day of free agency. If you just look at their depth chart this year, if they're going to anoint some of these young kids on the team, they just weren't going to sign too many players. So, what does that mean? I think that they started to get the impression that Brock Boeser had, was going to get higher AAV offers and higher term than they were willing to do. Now, after the fact, I've done some of my own reporting, and I think the Wild actually were going to get up to doing about a 6-year deal with him, but they were pretty much led to believe that he had something else cooking. And what we find out, of all these teams that came after him, he re-signs with the Vancouver Canucks. None of us saw that it's happening. If you remember March 7th when we were in Vancouver for the trade deadline, I actually reported at the morning skate when Boeser was on the ice that I had heard from sources that Vancouver had actually started re-engaging him on a contract, which told me that they weren't getting a lot of trade offers for him. Then they don't come out and they trade him. Patrick Alvin, their GM, comes out and basically says they were offered almost nothing for him of substance, which I found kind of disparaging toward Brock. But he basically said that nobody came after him at a deal that was
right. I remember at the time, and there were nobody was even offering a first round pick.
No,
and which was what they were. Yeah. What originally the rumors were that's what Vancouver needed to have in the package was a first round pick. And I remember talking with the Vancouver TV guys, and they said supposedly everybody they've talked to is offering like a third, fourth round picks, and that's crazy. And for that, we'll just keep him.
Yeah. And so he goes back there. So I think that when the Wild started to realize we are not getting Boeser and we can't wait till July 1, I think they made this decision to go get the Tarasenko essentially for free. Not free when it comes to money, free when it comes to assets. So that's why they did it. Now, could they have done other stuff, get a Mangiapane on a 2-year? Who knows? But I think that they thought that this would be a good bet because Kirill was really trying to recruit him and get him here and things like that.
And the only thing
recruiting is, by the way, the wrong word. That is not the way it works.
Exactly.
Before he waived his no trade, he called Kirill. So this wasn't Kirill doing the work. It was,
and that's all legal.
Yeah, absolutely,
for sure. But here's the only thing I'd say is, so when you start to think about sometimes these players and you dig a little deeper. I just mentioned Vladimir Tarasenko. Yes, last year was an off year. The 2 years before that, which most people consider off years for him, he's over 50 points in both of those years. Brock Boeser, if you look at his career, he's had one season where he had more than 54 points. He had that 170-point year. All his other years, 46, 49, 44, 48, 50. That's what Tarasenko does in an off year. Mm-hmm. So it isn't like you just missed on a guy who had this unbelievable advantage over Tarasenko. In his best seasons, he hasn't been as good as Tarasenko's been in the last couple where he's been down. I think if I were the Wild, there is no way I would have given Brock Boeser 7 years, $7+ million.
Yeah, I was shocked when I found out that they had pretty much said we'll do 6. I that shocks me because I thought they were going to max off for 3 or 4 years. But I think they could have gotten stretched, but they got and I've been saying it on this podcast. Remember about 3 weeks ago when it was reported by Nick Kypreos that it was that he had was all but assured to come to Minnesota. I was letting people know not so fast. This is hardly a sure thing. First of all, we had to see what the Wild did at the trade, at the draft, quote unquote trade deadline, at the draft. But the other thing is, I got the impression that Brock really wasn't interested in playing at home. And I think this showed it. And in the end, he had a ton of offers. I mean, it just shows how great of an agent Ben Hankinson is. He was getting fielded offers 6-7 year deals at this AAV, but he wanted to go back to Vancouver. He never wanted to leave. And so he winds up signing there. And I think what this shows you, Anthony, to bring this back to the Wild, is how hard it is to make a trade in today's NHL. Just think about this right now. At the trade deadline, Vancouver couldn't get more than a third-round pick for Brock Boeser. And then come July 1, everybody, there's half a dozen or a dozen teams offering him 6-7 year deals. I think that just shows you, from a Wild perspective, why it was so hard for them to make a trade.
I also think it's an indication of this free agent class.
Yeah.
All these guys knew, and that I think is why you saw so many guys re-signing with their teams before teams wanting to re-sign their guys before free agency started, because they were looking around saying, well, if we don't sign our own guy, July 1st, where are we going to, we're going to give Christian Dvorak $5.5 million a year. I mean, I think that's why you saw some teams just before the free agency started start to lock their own guys up long term,
Tavares,
and just say let's make sure we at least keep the guy we have, so that we don't have to overpay for something else. And this class was thin, and therefore you knew these guys that were there were likely to get overpaid, because teams were looking around
Kyle
saying,
Granlund, who's bounced around from team to team to team since he was traded to Nashville, $7 million at 3 years. It's crazy.
And
I give him credit, by the way, because for a guy that's been as many teams as he has, for him to constantly get significant. First of all, his agent Todd Diamond's done a masterful job.
Yeah, and although I will
he had a
say,
great playoff for Dallas.
He had a great play and a great finish to the season. He was a great fit for them, and he would have been a guy that if I knew I could get him for, I'd rather have him for 3 years at $7 million than Brock Boeser for 7 years.
Well, I think that's what it comes down to. Like the Wild originally, they were perfectly fine bringing Brock here on a 3 year deal, but then it showed you how much they really realized that they needed to do something significant to get scoring punch at the deadline or at free agency, when they started to, all right, maybe we'll go to 5 or 6 years. But when they, I think, during their due diligence, realized that he was not going to sign here, they pivoted, and their pivot was to Tarasenko. Now, we'll see how it turns out. I personally agree. I know this like I said this on the radio today, and listening to myself say it, I felt like I was sort of holding the Wild's water. But I agree with Bill Guerin yesterday when he says that he thinks they're better right now. They had Nico Sturm. Yeah, like to me, like Tarasenko on the second line is an upgrade than Johansson.
Right.
Johansson on the third line is an upgrade on Trenyon there. Right. And then you have now Nico Sturm is better than
fourth line.
Yeah.
Right.
So now, to me, where this team goes next year, like I see all these people saying this team is not constructed well enough to make the playoffs. Where they go this year will depend largely on the kids, I think. Like, one, health, but two, the kids. Like, can Volstat wins games?
Right. Can
Ogren and Urov produce? Right now they are thin on the back end, with Brodin especially going to miss the start of the year. If you have a third pair, we're going to talk about this in a second. I want to talk to you about what the pairs, but if you have Boehm and Juracek, it's going to be largely up to them. Can they defend at this level?
Yeah, and let's get into that later. Let's start with where you were. That was Billy's comment, we're better than we were last year. Yes, right now they are. And I would just say, for all those who say like, well, this was the big splash we were waiting for, was Vladimir Tarasenko, when we could have had Brock Boeser or could have had Mikhail Granlund, or let's see at the end of this year. I would almost be willing to put an even money bet that Vladimir Tarasenko has more points this year than Brock Boeser. And you've got him on a 1 year deal at not half the price, 60% of the price, that you're going to have and that's all it does, is it gives you 1 year of a legitimate guy in that spot. And now the following year, you figure it out,
right,
whether it's somebody who's developed within your system, or you go out next year in the trade or free agent market and get the guy for that spot. But at 60% of the price, Tarasenko will, I guarantee you, will have 60% of the points Brock Boeser has. I'd bet you that he has that he outscores Boeser this season.
All right. When we come back, I want to talk to you about Nico Sturm, but I also want to kind of talk about the whole Christmas thing because, I do want to talk to you about because I get why the fans are disappointed, but let's talk more about that. We'll be right back on Worst Seats in the House. Have you ever driven past a piece of land and wondered who owns that? Or maybe you need to know exactly where a property line runs? That's where Onyx Hunt comes in, and it's not just for hunters. There are folks using Onyx for their jobs every day throughout the country. From farmers and ranchers mapping out their fields, wildland firefighters navigating rough terrain, to construction workers needing to know who owns what property, this app offers something for everyone. If you need the best land ownership maps, aerial imagery, and property boundaries in your pocket, Onyx Hunt is the tool for the job. Try it for free for 7 days. Download Onyx Hunt in the app or Google Play Store or visit onyxmaps.com/hunt to get started. If you're looking for a refreshing THC drink, well, check out Giggly. It tastes like your favorite cocktail with no aftertaste and just pure, bold flavor. It's made with real fruit juice and all natural ingredients. It's a Minnesota-made gem. You can find it at liquor stores and Quick Trip locations across Minnesota or get it shipped nationwide. Plus, with a new low pricing and low-calorie options, it's the perfect guilt-free sip. Try Giggly today.
We love supporting local businesses. We love working with local businesses. I started buying stuff at Twill in the Edina Galleria a long time ago. When I started this podcast network, I was really hoping I'd be able to work with Scott Dayton, the founder and owner of Twill, and I was lucky enough to be able to do so. Now my closet is pretty much all Twill stuff. I don't get free stuff. I don't get discounts. I don't ask for discounts. I go there and pay full freight because I want to support a local business also because the stuff is awesome. Just bought a fresh batch. I'm about to go on a vacation with my wife. Everything I'm packing is Twill stuff because it wears well. It's comfortable. It doesn't wrinkle on planes. It doesn't wrinkle in suitcases. It comes out looking good. It wears like iron, and I'm never going to have to replace it. It's just so simple. Everything from casual shoes to dressy shoes to golf stuff to dress stuff to suits. By the way, you get everything tailor fit, which really helps me out. And everything from, gopher stuff to winter stuff to summer stuff. They just have everything. So go to twillmn.com, sign up for email updates. They won't send you anything unless they have a very specific event they want you to know about. They won't spam you. And go in there and say hello. Tell them we sent you. It's just a pleasant group of knowledgeable people. They are experts at what they do. It's the best men's clothing store in Minnesota. Go check out Twill online and in person in the Edina Galleria.
Back here on Worst Seats in the House, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. We will have one show in July, by the way, right when we get back, actually, from Spain. We'll be doing one show in Spain, Anthony, which we've done our last trip. Yeah, it really is. I don't know how great it is to listen to, but it's fun for us that are actually there because it's a lot of inside jokes about the trip and things like that. And,
yeah, but it's also these.
Man, remember last year's we did by the pool there?
Yeah, great setting, and these people are usually big Wild fans that are on these trips with us, and we've had a chance to hang together for 4, 5, 6, 7 days by that point on the trip. And it is one of my favorite shows of the year. We've at that point shared a lot of stories over the course of a week. And some of that tends to leak into the show. It'll be fun. It'll be a good show.
Yeah. Let's talk about Christmas in July. Like, obviously, Craig Leopold said it. It's been recycled a lot here the last couple weeks, and now everybody's kind of using it against the team and all that stuff. And I get it. Like, even Craig, right? I mean, for 4 years, Craig and the fans have been sold this belief that, hey, we're going to spend this money. We're going to buy out Parisi and Suter. We're going to have unbelievable pay in the next 4 years, which the Wild somehow excelled over despite that pain. And then when we come out of it, we're going to have Christmas in July. And maybe the Wild should have saw this coming, that the free agent class was going to be bad. Maybe they only had one plan, and that was to get Brock Nelson. And I don't know if that really is free agent, that's Christmas in July. But what, and I know that fans don't want to hear this anymore because they've been patient. They've been waiting. They don't want to see free agent classes of Yakov Trenyan and Johnny Merrill and Dmitry Kulikov. And they want to see, right now, Bill Guerin has not actually signed really one impactful type of free agent, right? The last, Fenton was the one that brought in Zuccarello and Hartman, but they really haven't had a splash since then that I can remember off the top of my head.
No, but they really haven't had the ability to.
That's what I'm talking about. So they've been waiting for this, and everybody's like, this is what we got. The only thing I'll say is that if you look at the last bunch of trade deadlines, 2 of the last 3, right? Because 2 of the last 3 they bought 2 years ago they sold guys like Duham and Dewar. They've had to add bit pieces: Gus Nyquist, Justin Brazo, John Klingberg, Oscar Sundqvist, Marcus Johansson, like not impactful type of players. And now they're going to actually have the ability, if they're good at the deadline, to go out and make a splash in season, maybe make a splash. And what Bill keeps on saying, and this is where now fans can kind of hold him accountable, is he keeps on pointing out that, like, look at these last 4 years. You know, guys like Jack Eichel are traded, Mikko Rantanen, Matthew Tkachuk, and the Wild can't go big game hunting. So now if you don't go out and sign a Brock Boeser to 6 years or a Nikolai Ehlers to 6 years and get yourself tied up again, what it allows you is if all of a sudden Dylan Larkin says, enough, get me out of here. If all of a sudden Tage Thompson says, get me the heck out of here, like JJ Peterka just did, now it at least gives them the ability to be, as Bill Guerin keeps on saying, in the game. And I know that fans don't want to be patient anymore, but trust me, waiting for something like that is a lot better than going out and getting Pius Suter or Nikolai Ehlers today.
Overpaying.
Yeah.
Right. I agree with that. And I'll go back to the comment that Billy made that you commented on earlier. The team's better right now than it was at the end of last year. And then when you throw on top of it that, let's not forget that last year they got 41 games out of Kirill Kaprizov. If they have him from the other 41 and he adds another 56 points, this team has 100 points, 102 points, 104 points. They're maybe not contending for the division title with how Winnipeg piled up points early, but they're for sure a no-brainer playoff team. And I think it's probably reasonable to expect that Kirill Kaprizov plays 75 games this year. And so then you throw on top of it just that by putting Vladimir Tarasenko in your top six, you bump everybody else down into the role where they're probably more suited to play. And then it's incumbent now on the guys that are coming up through the system. Can Liam Ogren prove that he's a more viable fit in a third line role? And maybe what if he all of a sudden is a terrific player and he plays his way into the top six? Same with Urov. I mean, if these guys start at the bottom, but they outplay the vets in front of them, now you don't have, if Tarasenko's the guy there, you don't feel like, okay, well, if Ogren's better, this guy's here for 1 year. We'll bump him down and let Ogren have that spot. And maybe that's what we see. I think the team, especially up front, is in such a significantly better and deeper spot than they were at this time of year.
Yeah, up front. We'll talk about the blue line in a second. Health is paramount, because I do think that is what they're banking on too, is that at Christmas time they had the most points in the NHL until Kaprizov left. And then it was just a laundry list, right? Middleton breaks his wrist. Spurgeon gets slew-footed. Eriksson Ek breaks everything. Brodin's playing with the shoulder all year. It was just one after the other, and they just couldn't sustain it. But at the time, they showed that they were a really good hockey team at Christmas. So now if they are healthier, and now you add these pieces, potentially they're much better. Let's talk about Sturm. Sean Kuraly was the only real guy I would say out there that intrigued me. And he got a sort of a similar price. But I think they knew Sturm. I do think that his quotes to me on the radio, K-Fan, probably really sold them. I think that if you remember a couple years ago, in 2019, the Wild offered him a 5-year deal in the 2.5 range. He turned it down, and the Wild decided to trade him to Colorado. Since then, he wins 2 cups. But what Nico said to me on the radio the other day is that at the time he was 26 years old, he saw the guys in front of him, and he just didn't see at that stage of his career. Remember, he started his career late because he came out of college free agent out of Clarkson. He just felt like there's no path for me to be anything other than a fourth line center in my career. Now it's 4 years later. At the time, he made a career decision, and now he realizes that, look, I'm going to embrace this role. This is what I am in the league. And now he comes back here on a 2-year deal at $2 million a season. He checks, as Bill Guerin said, 2 boxes. He's a really elite penalty killer, and he is as good a face-off guy as there is in the NHL. And what I love about him, Anthony, and this is a story I can't wait to write next year, is he does something that I don't think enough of the Wild centers do. He talked about it on a Zoom the other day. He studies the intricacies of everybody from the linesman dropping the puck to the centerman that he's going up against before every game, how they hold their stick, all this type of stuff. He was talking about just all these different, the ways that players have changed the way they take faceoffs now. They haven't had a guy that I think puts enough effort into trying to win draws in this team since Koivu.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say puts effort into it because they have guys who put effort into it. But he's a student
behind
of it. Right, he's a student of it, and that is why you're talking about a guy who's a career almost 57% faceoff guy, and the last couple of years he's been over 1 year over 60, another year at like 58.5. And now granted, he doesn't take as many draws as some of the elite face-off men in the league. I think he'll probably end up taking more with Minnesota than he took last year.
Yeah.
The 2 previous years, though, he was up around 700 draws. I know last year he was only at 420 or something like that. But that's why it isn't an accident. I mean, I talked with Wes Walls a lot about this. And Wes was he wasn't a 58% face-off guy, but it mattered to him and he worked at it. And so when you have guys like this who embrace their role, Billy made that comment a number of times. This guy embraces his role. He understands his role. He knows how important his role is. A big part of that is to say, okay, if I'm going to take 12 draws tonight that are all going to be at key points, they're going to be draws that might swing the flow of the game, I'm going to make sure I do everything in my power to be as good as I can in those 12 draws. And that might be where the Wild haven't had. Joel Eriksson-Ek's got a whole bunch of other stuff on his plate. He's running the power play. He's on the penalty kill. He's centering the top line. It isn't just a guy saying, my impact on tonight's game is going to be these 12 faceoffs, like Nico Sturm might be.
Yeah, it's so well said. And although I do think the Wild really just, they find it peculiar that Eriksson-Ek's not better in the circle. Yeah, it makes no sense.
He looks like he should be a terrific face-off guy, and he's never had a season at 50%.
It's crazy.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And there'll be games where he'll be like just elite, but then the next game he just won't. So we'll see where it goes. I do think that they still want to be, I know that a lot of people were really jumped out to them that I had Europe as the 5th center in my depth chart. The only thing I'll say about that is that he is going to have, they're expecting growing pains. He's going to have to work his way up. I think after trading Gaudreau, they want to make sure that Hartman's in the middle because it's another right shot center. Otherwise, you don't have a right shot center. And so we'll just see where it goes. I mean, he could play wing. There's going to be injuries. This is a depth chart that I just put in July 1st. A lot of things can change. Rossi could still be traded. He really could, people. And we'll talk about that a little more as well. But I think that adding him and was probably the right move on day one because of the way that especially you and I in this podcast have bemoaned their horrendous penalty killing the last couple of years, their face-off lack of prowess the last couple of years, and just getting somebody like him who wants to be here, who's as physically fit as anybody in the league. I just think it was a really good move. Let's talk about the blue line, Anthony. I was surprised, knowing that, I've been alluding this on the last couple podcasts that I thought that Brodin had surgery and that he was going to miss the start of the season. Bill Guerin confirmed it the other day. One big reason why I was surprised they did trade Declan Chisholm is because I knew that he was going to miss the start of the year. And with Brodin, we also know that he gets injured a lot. And so Declan did turn out to be pretty handy. Now, he wound up getting $1.6 million a year from the Washington Capitals. I think the Wild also knew that was probably going to be his ARB number, and for them, it was too rich for him. But now, if the Wild don't add another NHL defenseman, which I have no reason to believe that they will, they are going to be relying on Juracek and Boeser in the lineup every night, unless Bogo is not the 7th D coming into the lineup, coming into the season. So how would you do that? Because right now, the way I'm being told is that they might start with Boeser and Juracek as a pair. You almost wonder without Brodin, Boeser's going to have to play elevated minutes, I would think, right? So where does this go? I mean, would you consider maybe when Brodin's back, a Brodin Spurgeon, Boeser Faber, and then Middleton and Juracek to have two rookies?
Yeah, two
together.
Rookies is tough, but there's so much that's gonna play itself out in this spot. Mm-hmm. And I've always felt like if Jake Middleton's on your third pair, I think you've got something. I think he might have be over, like cast just slightly above his skill set to be in the top 4. He's been good there. But I think the best case scenario for Minnesota would be that Bouillon plays his way into the top 4. Middleton and Jiricek become your third set, and you go from there. I don't. Who knows how long Brodin is going to be out? I mean, if it's a couple weeks at the start of the season, that's one thing.
I will say that everybody from not only the Wild on Brodin's side of the camp too, they also say it's not going to be long.
Right. If it's Christmas, that's a different story. Yeah. If it's 2 weeks, then the Chisholm thing doesn't. I don't think it's a major factor at all. But now Bouillon and Jiricek are both going to be given every chance to secure a spot in the lineup in training camp. But that doesn't mean that they've done it. It doesn't mean they've earned it yet. We got to see. And Jiricek showed flashes when he was with the Wild last year. He also showed flashes of why he's never been able to stick with Columbus earlier in his career. And Bouillon, who knows? I mean, I think
how funny would it be if they bring back Johnny Merrill suddenly out of the blue here in the next couple of days?
And I wouldn't mind having Johnny Merrill as my 8th defenseman if it's at
Brent Burns signed with the Avs today,
right? But I thought John Merrill last year had one of his better seasons.
Yeah,
and if he's your 8th defenseman, you can do a lot worse.
And again, Bill Guerin is going into the season with cap space. So if all of a sudden it looks like, oh boy, these kids are not ready, you could easily trade for a D.
Right. And then you can allow those guys to ease their way in. We talked, I think, last week on the show about, to me, Zach Bogosian is a guy that, he looked like he probably tired as the season went on last year, because there were some stretches early in the season last year where they looked terrific. And maybe early in a season this year, if you need him to do a little bit more because there's injuries above for the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe he's in a great spot to do that. But if you're going to ask him to play 17 minutes a night for 82 games, probably at this point in his career, that isn't going to put him in the best spot.
Marco Rossi. So the way right now they are still not. They're in a contract dispute. There has, as far as earlier today, not been conversation between the two sides in, I think, 3 weeks. He is eligible for an offer sheet. I do think his agent's shopping for one. Bill Guerin said it publicly the other day, pretty much to 31 teams. That's what it was intended for. We will match. But I will tell you that if, like, there is a price point that, like, as Bill Guerin says, we will match. He then pointed out that we have a structure that we have him at. And if I'm just saying it's a if, and it's a big if his agent found a $7 million offer sheet at 5 years, is Bill Guerin really matching that? I'm not positive. We'll see. And then they're in deep trouble.
Okay, well, let's there's two parts to that question. Number one, do you think there's a team out there that gives him $7 million per for 5 years?
I don't know. A lot of teams have cap space.
Right. That's the reason for the question.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that the way that we have to do it is you almost have to go to and look, see, all right, who has their first and third, because that's what the compensation would be, and their original first and third. And then we can almost cut it down from there. And actually, that's a good project that I might do tomorrow, is actually just go look, take the 31 other teams, see who has their first and third next year, write down those 20, let's say, and then try to go through their cap, their centers, all that, and see if I could figure it out. I believe that Bill also said that because they've done that homework, and they feel there's only 2 or 3 teams that would even be able to.
So that was exactly my point. I did dig through a couple, because we had talked hypothetically about would it be a contender looking at Rossi as a last piece to the puzzle? If it's a team that's likely out of it, are they going to say we'll give away a first and a third for him? I think it's got to be. I actually think
that would be the more likely team. I think right. Here's a good idea. I don't think Mike Greer would ever have the guts to do it to Billy, because Billy might pound him because they're such good buddies. But like they got to get to the cap. Like they're $9 million below the cap.
Right.
Like,
but so to me,
and to them, they have so many picks and prospects that would a first and third mean anything to them?
Maybe, but to me, the most logical fit was still those teams in the middle.
Yeah.
The teams, like Buffalo, like not Carolina, but like Detroit.
Definitely not Buffalo, because the Wild offered Rossi.
Yeah,
for Peterka,
I'm saying like teams
interest
in that spot where they're a middle of the pack team. It's not like a team looking for the last piece of the puzzle, but it's also not a team in a total rebuild. Those teams kind of in the middle. And I did kind of glance through, and I was like, there aren't very many of these teams that could even make this offer. So I think I think it's a pretty small list of teams. So that was the first part of my question. Is I'd be surprised. I'll be mildly surprised if there's a 5-year, $7 million deal out there.
So what do you think?
And then the second part is if the way Billy Guerin has gone through this, I can't imagine that he lets Marco go in that scenario. My guess is he'd be like, you know what?
F this,
screw it. I'm going to sign the guy. We're only talking about $1 million a year from what I'd ideally like to sign him.
Oh, they want to pay him max 5 on any deal.
So, that's, I think my guess is that if a team came up with an offer, which I think it's unlikely, that Billy would match it. Even if he matched it with the sole purpose of, I'm going to match it, and then once I have him under contract, I'm going to try to trade him to somebody else.
Well, that's what my next point here. Now, I'm wondering where this goes, because if let's just say no offer sheet, then this is going to go for a while, because Billy's just going to make them sweat. And Marco, frankly, might make the Wild sweat, because even though you and I have both covered, contract disputes before that have gone right up until camp or even beyond, the reality is if you look at the Wild's depth chart, Marco's a 60-point guy that they cannot afford to not have in this lineup. So I actually think the leverage is more on Marco's side personally. Now, he's not going to sit out till December 1. He wants to play hockey. But the reason why I'd be a little concerned on how this is going to get bridged is, and this is from talking from people on Marco's side, is they are really concerned to just take that undervalued bridge deal, because in their eyes, then they know what's going to happen. And that's just it's going to buy Billy a little more time to try to trade him at an affordable contract, knowing, because Billy also has the intelligence to know which teams even showed interest in him for futures before at times. So he knows who was at least interested in them. And so that's my only concern on how this is ever going to get bridged.
I think that if there's an offer sheet, the Wild match.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, signing him under both sides' own volition, I just don't know how that's going to bridge. When we come back, do we have any thoughts, by the way?
We don't have any thoughts.
Because I will say this, I have a lot of really good Twitter questions this weekend. They're not just hockey stuff. It's stuff about our careers.
Vinny, now this is a little bit of a lack of commitment on his part. Vinny, who was here for the Donkey Classic. I know he appeared on last week's show and predicted his team to win, which they didn't, by the way. Then when I texted him today, I said, hey, podcast tonight, remember to send your thoughts. And he just said, I've been really catching up on things.
Yeah. Did he find his ID that he left at a gas station and made Ariana in traffic before work have to go get it?
Yeah. Otherwise, he'd still be here. Then he'd be live on the show. And I delivered a computer, by the way, to make sure that somebody could drive it back to Denver for AJ.
So just if you weren't listening to the fan when I had Anthony on the other day, one of his sons flew home without his laptop. The other son went to the airport without his ID that he apparently left at a gas station. And Ariana, who had to go work the other day, had to go bring it to him so he can get on his airplane.
Everybody made it home.
Yep, everybody made it home. But there's just something about your kids. There's just a little wire that's not connected. No offense, Margot. But this is, first of all, it's not your fault. We know whose fault it is. We'll be right back. Do you want spotless dishes, softer laundry, and better tasting water straight from the tap? Well, you can get all of that with a Connecticut water treatment system from Aquarius Home Services. You can have worry-free water throughout your home for less than the cost of my daily coffee habit, and trust me, that's a lot. For a limited time, you could save up to 25% on a new Connecticut system. Plus, get a free water analysis. How do you do all of this? Well, go to AquariusHomeservices.com for details. That's AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended. And don't forget to mention that Russo sent you.
It's time for change. Experience better banking at Royal Credit Union and put your financial goals in motion with helpful tools and personal support. Get started at rcu.org/time. Insured by NCUA.
Hey, have you been dreaming of a lake cabin lifestyle with boating, fishing, and family fun in northern Minnesota? Well, lately I've thought a lot about how cool it would be to have a getaway like so many Minnesotans. And if you're like me, you probably think that owning your own lakeside getaway is beyond your budget. Well, if you think lake cabin real estate prices keep going up, well, think again. This is Russo, and I'm here to tell you there is an affordable way to enjoy a cabin lifestyle and all that goes with it. And yes, I said affordable. I founded a Clamshell Beach Resort, which is located on the Whitefish chain of 14 lakes for you and your family to enjoy. Here's how. Clamshell has lake homes that offer deeded fractional ownership, and the keywords there are deeded and fractional. You own it. Imagine having 5 weeks a year to enjoy Clamshell with its beaches, pool, and lodge that's full of kids' activities. Is golf your game? There's a great golf course right across the road. Like winter sports? Well, you can go ice fishing, cross-country skiing, or snowmobiling right out the door at Clamshell. And there's no maintenance, no grass mowing, no snow removal. It's done all for you. And you can own a share of Clamshell Beach Resort at an affordable price. To learn more about ownership opportunities at Clamshell Beach Resort, go to cottagesonwhitefish.com or contact Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. That's cottagesonwhitefish.com or Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. Back here, worst seats in the house, Mike Russo, Anthony LaPanta. Let's go through some X questions. Any update on Mason Shaw and what he's up to would be awesome. Dave Schmidt says, I actually ran into Mason Shaw during the Stanley Cup final. I was connecting in Minnesota to go to Edmonton on a WestJet flight for one of the games in Edmonton from Florida. And all of a sudden I look like 4 rows in front of me. I'm like, Mason. it was him. So I got to talk to him for a little bit.
So wait, he was 4 rows in front of you, so he has higher priority than you?
So on WestJet, there's no first class seats anymore, so I couldn't be in front of him. That was baloney. There's not even comfort. Yeah, trust me. It was not a fun existence. Delta has gotten rid of all their flights there, and I had to sit back in steerage.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
I can't wait to see Mason Shaw. I'm going to ask him about that. So
yeah, exactly.
You sat 4 rows in front of Russo?
Yeah. But I'll be honest, I didn't talk to him about his future then. But right now, he doesn't appear, obviously, that he's signed yet. Fred Schneider asks, was the decision not to QO O'Rourke to Toporowski due to their development stalling, or just wanted to shake up the Iowa roster? I'd say both. I don't know anything about Luke Toporowski, but I will say there's no doubt that Ryan O'Rourke was not the player that they expected him to be. Fred also asked about next year's free agent class looking insane. Anyone you'd like to see the Wild target? I mean, like, it's hard to believe because after this year's class, I don't care who's available. Like, we all just almost think that everybody's going to re-sign with their team. Like Jack Eichel is somebody that I think the Wild would look incredibly good in their lineup. But don't you think Vegas is going to figure out a way to sign him? And if not, he's going back to Boston.
Yeah, especially with the cap going up. Mm-hmm. So now it isn't as difficult to sign these guys with the. And it isn't just because what the sheer number of the cap is, it's that it's increasing.
Right.
So if you had said, like, let's just say the cap was $102 million, well, everybody would have spent to that in the past. But when it goes up to that, it gives everybody that extra bonus cushion, and it makes it a lot easier to re-sign your own players.
Yep. I'll get to the question that's kind of about more of how our beginnings began, but Spoke 612 asks, how does Benyek, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, I should have asked him today, differ from Rossi? So they have their development stuff going on right now. They're not going on the ice this week. They've changed it up. So they're doing a lot of seminars with them, on social media and dealing with media and nutrition and working out. And then they've done all the stuff that we've seen on their social media account, like escape rooms, and they golf today and things like that. So they've really changed it up. A lot less players than they usually bring in. They brought in last year's draft picks, essentially, in this year's. So we talked to Benyek today. He's the kid that's 5'7" that they drafted the other day that honestly everybody tells me if he was like 6 foot even, he'd probably be a first round, like top 5 pick. That's how good this kid is. Played at Youngstown last year from the Czechia. His English is tremendous. Buddies with Spacek, buddies with both Juracek brothers. And just today actually was drafted number 2 in the import draft to Brantford. My guess is Alan Walsh actually arranged that because otherwise I've got the impression that Kelowna probably would have taken him number 1. But if he goes to Brantford, Adam Juracek, his best friend, plays on that team, which is David's brother. And what was really neat is that we saw on social media the other day when the Wild drafted Benyek, David Juracek is from his hometown. He just showed up to where he was with a bunch of Wild stuff that he had from being here and gave it to him. So that's pretty sweet. How does he differ than Marco Rossi is the question. I mean, first of all, they're different human beings. He's 4 years younger to be able to develop, and maybe they get something here. So we'll see. I mean, I get the point that, talking about size and things like that. But we'll see. This kid looks like you look at his YouTube stuff, he is special. All right, here's one about both of us, Anthony, and nobody likes talking about ourselves more than us. Why did you choose to write/announce hockey? Is there a specific story that made you guys fall in love with the game? Go for it.
Well, I would say for me, it was listening to Al Shaver call North Star games when I was a kid that got me excited about calling hockey. So then I used to call the play-by-play for hockey games in the street while we were playing street hockey, which I'm sure all the kids in the neighborhood love to tell the story now that I used to play street hockey against this clown when he was calling the play-by-play while we were playing.
Yeah.
But I loved listening to hockey broadcasters more than other sports. Goal calls. There's no play in any other game, in any other sport. I love baseball. I've called a lot of baseball games, but there isn't a play, like a goal in hockey is different from everything else. Games are largely played up to 3, maybe up to 4. Could happen out of nowhere. That's what excited me about hockey, the speed and that a game-changing goal could happen anywhere. And I get it. You could have a home run on one swing of a bat, for sure. But you can also score runs other ways in baseball. In hockey, it's one way. Puck goes in the net, you get a point. 3 or 4 is good enough to win. So for me, that's what it was. That's what separated hockey from other sports was just that speed and the excitement and how it could come out of nowhere at any moment.
And you're blessed with the great voice, as is Stev, your brother. I haven't, I don't know Matt as well. Does he have that?
He doesn't have the same voice.
Yeah.
Stev and I sound the same. Matt,
it's crazy.
doesn't.
Like you and Stev, actually me and my brother and I should say, we have the same exact pretty much the same voice too. But you and Stev, it's if Stev, when he does call me, actually, because that happens a good amount during fantasy hockey season. Sometimes if I didn't have caller ID, I wouldn't know who the heck it was.
You think it's just because he wants to try to sound like me?
Yeah, probably.
So do you and your brothers, when you write, does it come across the same?
Probably. He writes very legally because he is a partner at a law firm. He writes, I'm sure, much more important things than I do. For me, I mean, I could tell my Cliff Notes version of how my career started. I grew up on Long Island during the Islanders' heyday. I was really young during their heyday, but I guess there was no child labor laws when I was a kid because I was a paper boy at like 10, 11 years old, like alone, just with a Pathmark shopping cart, going and delivering newspapers, collecting money and things like that. But the one thing I did, I also wanted to be a play-by-play guy. Like my mom could tell you stories about me just sitting on the couch with a flashlight, calling every single game that I was watching on TV, baseball, basketball, especially Chicago Bulls games, but hockey as well. But the one thing I did I remember doing, and this is definitely not why I was a sports writer, but it probably certainly helped, is during my paper route, my buddies and I would go together because we'd want to get done with it. Newsday at that time was an afternoon paper, so when I would come home from middle school, it would be sitting on my driveway, the newspapers, and we would always play street hockey in sneakers in our street there in Beatrice Lane in New York, in Long Island, in Old Bethpage, and they would help me deliver the newspapers so then we can go and play street hockey. But I used to, during my paper route, I'd put in my Walkman. And I'd read every article on the entire, like every single article, Mets, Yankees, Islanders, Rangers, everything. And I do think the one thing that did, just coincidentally, for 3 or 4 years later when I moved to Florida when I was 12, and at 15 I got a job at the Sun Sentinel. I think it actually showed, like, I knew the style on how to write sports, because sports writing is different than actual real writing. I mean, it's in newspaper terms, 16 to 18 inches, 600, 800 words at The Athletic, 2,000 words. But like one paragraph is maybe one sentence, 2 sentences. It's not like you would write an essay for school. So right away, when I started writing at 15, 16, 17 for these major papers down in Florida, I wrote at times for the Boca News, Palm Beach Post, and the Sun Sentinel. I knew the style of sports writing. And my first 4 or 5 years there as a teenager, and then when I became the Panthers writer at 21, I covered everything in town. So I got to cover college football. I got to cover Marlins, Heat, Dolphins, and Panthers. I got to run quotes for Associated Press and watch how professional sports writers did their job. So I think it just set me up. but I've always been a hockey fan. I was a giant Islanders fan. I covered the West Palm Beach Blaze, which was this minor league down in Florida that Bill Nyrup, who's from Edina or was from Edina, was the commissioner of the league, owned that franchise, was the coach of the team, GM. And I just loved the sport. So hockey was the one thing I wanted to do. And so in 2005, when the Star Tribune was recruiting me and the Sun Sentinel at the same time after the lockout was saying, we'll let you cover anything here, but not the Panthers after the lockout, that was when I took the plunge and moved here. So that's sort of how I became. But I don't love sports writing nearly enough to not cover hockey. Like, this is my passion. And the one thing about hockey people too is they recognize and respect sports writers that love the game. Because a lot of sports writers that start as a hockey writer, it's like they use it as a stepping stone. Like, how could I cover the Vikings? How could I cover the Wolves? Whatever. And I have just always been a consistent hockey writer. So that's the story. Space Hyatt Wyatt asks, any idea what number Sturm will wear this time around? And that is 78. First 78 in Wild history, first 91 in Wild history, Anthony. How about that?
Huh. I hadn't really thought about what number, but
I think I put Anthony to sleep with my story.
Yeah, I stopped listening a little while ago.
There's going to be a quiz after this,
I
Anthony.
suppose you don't think you'll be able to get 7 back?
No, I don't think so. And he knew it on the call. SueFan28, because who's the all-time best free agent pickup this is NHL history. He or she is saying NHL history, all-time worst. I mean, that's hard. Let's talk Wild. I mean, who'd you say is the best? I mean, obviously this Parise Suter. I still think one of the best.
Suter was that was a franchise changer. And that immediately put them on the map. And that started this run of being in the playoffs almost every year.
Yeah.
That changed the franchise.
Two more I'd throw out there is Brian Ralston. He was 3 30-goal seasons here, outstanding career here in Minnesota. The other one I'll say is Zuccarello. Like, that was largely panned when he came here. And just think of how important he has been to Kirill Kaprizov. Like, you could actually make an argument that might be the most. Like, if he re-signs for 8 years, Zuccarello's relationship and how he took him under his wing here, became friends with him here, guided him here, everything. I don't know. That's a real, and how he's been so integral into Kaprizov's success. I mean, pretty important signing.
I think,
as I said at the time, great signing by Paul Fenton.
And I liked Zuccarello when they signed him, but I was a little worried about 5 years.
And now he's been here 8, right?
But I just think it's if you're just even all of that is ancillary. I think what he's done on the ice has been significant, where I'd put him in the top couple. But what I think sometimes people lose sight of is they take for granted the fact that this has now become a franchise that's in the playoffs every year. And I know that we've talked about it a lot, 11 playoff trips in 13 years. And the immediate knee-jerk reaction is, well, yeah, but they've only been in the second round twice. But to put it in perspective, the team had only been to the playoffs 3 times in their history prior to that signing. And I think it was 11 years, if I remember right, maybe 12, either 11 or 12. And it's been 11 of 13 since. So just remember what it used to feel like and in those first 11 or 12 years, there had only been one team that went past the first round. Mm-hmm. And they were certainly a couple of those were in the early stages after expansion, where it's not realistic to think that they would have been a contender, but it just is. It changed this franchise forever. I think there's no comparison to Parise Suter.
Yeah. I agree. But I will say Zuccarello's turned into a heck of a pickup. So sorry for changing the question there a little bit to more Wild. Somebody goes, what are some good new nicknames for the Grand Casino Arena? You can't really ever say it because you're as the play-by-play person with the amount of money that these naming rights people pay for we could call them the X. You can't. But I don't know. I mean, hopefully it's not the craps table. That'd be a fun one.
I don't think I'll be
ice.
Using anything like that.
I made a joke the other day, but somebody didn't like it, so I didn't use it. It was the goal horn could be a slot machine jackpot sound. I think that'd be kind of funny. Brett Dawson asks, is it still possible to keep Vinny Hinostroza on the 4th line? Unless they're injured, there's no way he's making the team. Do you see a way? I mean, if he's making the team, Liam Ogren's in the minors,
right?
Or Yurov's in the minors.
And
I don't think anybody wants that.
I can't imagine that's the case. Maybe on a same kind of spot with some of these other guys where maybe he's on an American League deal and somebody gets hurt, he comes up and he was fine, but he was not. This was not an impact player.
Jim Foster, I think my old colleague at the Star Tribune, asked same. With the additions of Tarasenko and Sturm, what does it mean for the changes of Yurov and Ogren to make the lineup in anything but a fourth line role? I mean, right now, if Johansson is on the third line, Yurov is probably, going into camp, having to work his way into the lineup, because I would think that you're going to have Eriksson, Rossi, Hartman, and Sturm in front of him. And then Ogren, same thing. I would think that, you have he's not getting in the top six. If Johansson is starting on the third line, Ogren's starting on the fourth. I mean, you're just gonna have to wait for
see those
injuries.
two guys going either way, just depending on how things go during camp. And if Yurov's great, outplay him. If you want their job, take it.
Kim Martin asks, when will we see the new jersey and when will the schedule come out? The schedule's coming out July 16th, day after the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. I think the NHL picked that day thinking that they would just have free reign with all the news since nothing is going on. And the new jersey, there's not really a new jersey. They're going to have a 25-year anniversary jersey that they're allowed to wear 4 times. That's a league rule. And I would think that usually the way that those work historically is the Wild put that stuff out at the State Fair. Isn't that your recollection?
I have no recollection, but it's
shocking.
I mean, I don't know. I would assume that, that's probably State Fair probably makes sense. It's a couple weeks before training camp and allow people some time to buy the jersey before the season starts.
Yep. Lucas says, what's our way too early? I like this question. Look at lines and power play units. I'll go first. You go second. Okay. I think their first line is going to be, if it were me, I think it goes Kaprizov. I'll go Rossi, Boldy, Zuccarello, Eriksson, Tarasenko. Third line, Foligno, Hartman. I'm going Johansson because I've been told this by somebody in the organization, even though I don't think it should be that, but I'll go that. And then the fourth line being Trenyon, Sturm, and Ogren. You're also going to have to work his way in. I think the power play units are largely the same. I think it's going to be Boyum with Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Boldy, and Eriksson, and then a second unit, and this actually excites me if the first unit would ever get off the ice if they don't score, is now you add some talent. You got Faber on the second unit with Hartman, Johansson, Tarasenko, and Rossi. That's a pretty good second power play.
It is. The top six is interesting to me because I've loved Boldy and Eriksson together over the last couple. I could see, and I wouldn't mind a spot where you split Boldy and Kaprizov up, where you'd end up with more Boldy, Eriksson, and Tarasenko perhaps on one line, and then you leave Kaprizov and Zuccarello together with Marco Rossi. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that. I think long-term the team's better if two things happen. If Marco Rossi proves he can center a top line, and if Matt Boldy and Kirill Kaprizov are on two different lines. But if the production isn't there and you have to put those guys together, then I think things change. And I don't really like a line that would be Rossi with Tarasenko and Zuccarello. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So if you had that line, it would make more sense to have Eriksson centering. I just think there's a greater likelihood that you see Kaprizov and Zuccarello together early with Boldy paired with Eriksson.
And I would say that was the depth chart that I put in The Athletic has Boldy, Rossi, and Tarasenko, and that was told to me by somebody in the organization. So I think that's what they're thinking coming into camp. So I would agree. Even though I went with something different because I just kind of wonder. I just love Boldy with Kaprizov at the end of the year, but Zuccarello, everybody
loves Boldy with Kaprizov, but then what it does to the rest of the lines is significant.
I totally agree with you. I guess what I love about Zuccarello and Tarasenko is I think that really puts Tarasenko in a position to succeed because he's their best playmaker. Like Rossi is not your prototypical center from a playmaking standpoint, and even though he's not a bad passer at all, and again, and Boldy, Boldy is a great passer too. So either way, it's going to work. think it's going to work. Wild in on Isaac Howard. Somebody asked, as of the other day, they weren't. I do think things have changed this week. I think the Wild have at least made that call. I don't know what they could do to make that trade, though, like what they could offer to get Isaac Howard. If they get Isaac Howard, he'd probably leave college and play right away. And I think that they would put him in the lineup. The question is, to do that, you almost have to trade somebody from your lineup. And I don't think they have any need for Marco Rossi down there, because their top three centers, unless they move Nick Paul to the wing, is, Braden Point, Anthony Cirelli, and Nick Paul. I guess you can move Paul to wing. I haven't counted their cap space. They're pretty tight up against it, and they've been reportedly in on Ehlers too. All right, last question of the show, Anthony. And I probably should have warned you on this one, but what is your favorite all-time best quote lineup, as in 5 skaters and a goalie, who have been the best for you to interact with as a reporter?
Oh boy.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I'll just go. Danny
Heatley's at or near the top of my list.
Yeah. This is hard because I've covered the league for 31 years now. But in Minnesota, there's so many, right? I mean, Brian Ralston, Mark Parrish, Burns, goalies, we've had so many, like Fleury, Dubnyk, Backstrom. These are incredible quotes. I mean, Bugard's a great quote. Like, I could never just go 5. Like, on this team, Foligno, and then it's like what you want. If you want to really like interesting,
yeah, you're talking about a guy who makes you laugh, or a guy that gives you some great insight.
Like you want a great quote, go listen to Nico Sturm. He's just fascinating to listen to. So it's hard, right? All time best, but there've been so many here. I mean, so many over the years. I love talking to
Nico all the time.
Yep.
I know you didn't always get the greatest quotes from him, but I love talking to him about the game. I love talking to both Zach Parise and Ryan Suter about the game. I thought they were both always thoughtful, always gave you a legit answer. And Danny Heatley was more of a one-liner wisecrack guy, but his quotes were great, made me laugh. I don't
there's so many. Walls was an incredible quote.
Until he started ducking you.
Until that one time where he asked me, he's like, "Do you watch the games, Mike?" So there we go.
Which is what he still asks you.
Yeah, I know. But I wish I covered Wes longer, because Wes is one of those people that when you talk to him, you really learn about the game.
I learn every night when we work together. Yeah, like there's always something.
Yeah, like that guy knows the game. He sees everything. He's just he just knows the sport. So it was fun covering him. Thanks for joining us at the Aquarius Home Services studio on this late Wednesday night, Thursday morning as this pod comes out. Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems, Clamshell Beach Resorts, Giggly THC Beverages, Onyx Maps, Twill in the Edina Galleria, and Royal Credit Union. Our next podcast probably will come from Madrid or Barcelona, actually most likely Barcelona, because we like to do it at the end of our trip. And then we will have one live show later this month, and then we will have another one. And in August, we'll have a live show as well at some point in that month as well. So pay attention to the Talk North social media account and Russo Hockey and Anthony retweeting us for when the next live show is. Talk to you next week, everybody. So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world won't forget.